When the world collapsed due to the Hollow disaster in Zenless Zone Zero, only a handful of new settlements were able to survive, one of which was New Eridu. The city was able to survive and thrive due to the support of many individuals, scientific institutions, and great families. Among these great families are the Hoshimis, a family with exceptionally powerful warriors. Their third generation ancestor was one of the very first people to be given the title of Void Hunter, and even their current family head is one as well. Because of this, many believe that the family's strength lies in its superior bloodline, but the truth couldn't be further from this. You see, while the Hoshimi family have altruistic goals, hidden among the annals of history is a rather dark secret, one they keep under wraps at all costs, and is the true source of their family's power. That is what we will be discussing in this video, the Hoshimi family's dark secret. Before we get into that though, if you want to see more Zenless Zone Zero content, do consider subscribing to the channel. As you might have guessed, since we will be talking about Miyabi's family here, there will be quite a few spoilers for Miyabi's lore and the 1.4 story. So if you haven't played through that yet, you might want to before diving into this video. Consider this your obligatory spoiler warning. As I mentioned earlier, the Hoshimi family has been around since the early days of New Eridu. The earliest member that we are made aware of is actually one of the original 7 Void Hunters, Swordmaster. But even then, the Swordmaster was a 3rd generation Hoshimi, meaning the family has likely been around even earlier than that. Very little else is known about their family despite their rather prominent position amongst New Eridu's elites. As of 1.4, we have only really ever seen stories about Miyabi and her parents. Regardless, they are without a doubt pretty influential, as despite not holding any political office, Miyabi's father still rubs shoulders with very important people like the mayor. Now, to the average person, such a prestigious family likely owes their power and influence purely from the contributions of its members. I mean, this family has produced 7 generations of swordmasters who have aided and supported New Eridu. This might give the impression that their bloodline is exceptionally superior, the cream of the foxy crop, so to speak. In 1.4, however, we learn that this isn't actually the case. While the family has a long and prestigious history, at the focal point of their influence is their family heirloom, one that every family head inherits, the katana tailless. Sarah, Perman's fake assistant, reveals that the power the family wields is actually all tied to this very sword. The strength it affords its wielders is why this blade has been passed down for so many generations, likely from the days of the Swordmaster herself. If the sword really can give such an immense power boost to its wielder, it's understandable why it's been kept a close-guarded secret by the Hoshimi family. That said, there is another reason for this secrecy. Simply put, the sword is not only cursed, but the power sealed within it is forbidden. Now, truth be told, we don't really know everything about this weapon, but I'll try to piece together what we did learn in the story and make some educated guesses. Firstly, the blade itself contains some kind of sentient entity that chooses whether or not to grant its wielder power. There are many voices that can be heard that range from an old voice, a resolute one, and even a heroic one. Each voice seems to speak independently of the others, but the old or ancient voice seems to be the more dominant one. Wielders of the katana can seemingly converse with these entities and can even be taken to an inner world where they seemingly reside. It's also very likely that many of the past wielders are also contained within the sword, as there are several mentions of them becoming sacrifices for the sword. Miyabi's mother even appears briefly within the swirling abyss of the sword's inner world in one of the animated shorts. We also learn from these shorts that in order to bequeath the sword to the next user, it's very likely that the new owner needs to kill the previous wielder, or at the very least, the current wielder must die or be sacrificed. During the path to becoming a hero animated short, Miyabi's mother had her wield the sword before piercing herself on it, after which it then possessed Miyabi. I also suspect that the wielder becomes slowly corrupted by ether the more they use the cursed sword's power, as we see ether crystals appear on Miyabi's mother as the animated short progressed. The drawbacks don't stop there though. While the sword does imbue the wielder with immense power, it also slowly burns them with foxfire. In order to recover, the user must continuously kill or consume souls, which regenerates them, but at the same time also makes the flames increase in intensity. This loop continues endlessly until the user is burnt out or is able to somehow suppress the flames and regain control. When Miyabi was pulled into the illusion or the sword's inner world, she experienced exactly this, becoming more powerful and even slightly recovering the more she killed, but also taking on more damage as the flames grew more intense. In addition to that, this sword radiates immensely with ether energy, and when it was released, overflowed with insane levels of power. All this makes the blade sound completely impossible to wield, but the scabbard Miyabi has seems to mitigate this somewhat. From what we are told, the scabbard not only acts as a cool looking sword holder, but might actually function as a seal. While they were trapped in the outer ring hollow, Phaethon was able to analyze the inner workings of the scabbard. They realized that the way it was designed was almost like a hollow itself, an artificial maze that is constantly changing. But why would you design a sword scabbard in this way? Why would the sword need to be sealed, and why model it after a hollow of all things? This is what made me think that perhaps the entity contained within the sword is not only past users, but likely a very powerful ethereal. Who or what this ethereal is, I don't really know, but one candidate that comes to mind is perhaps the Exaltis Overseer, the being that the first Hoshimi Swordmaster defeated. Regardless of who it is, the scabbard likely functions in this way because it's literally meant to keep an ethereal from escaping. Now, you might say that, well, in some of the animated shorts, we do see the blade generally kept sheathless, so is the scabbard really needed? Well, I kind of thought about this as well. What if, in the past, in order to keep whatever was sealed in the sword contained, the sacrifices were a necessary part of the ritual and inheritance tradition? The continuous killing and sacrifice of its users satiated the entity and kept it within the sword. Simply put, as long as you use the sword and end up sacrificing yourself at the end, everything would be fine. The scabbard is required now because Miyabi simply doesn't rely on the power of the blade itself. She is a swordsmanship prodigy, and her father pretty much confirms this as he mentions her strength comes from her own abilities and not the sword itself. She is the first in her family to actually do this. Without the killing and sacrifices though, this means that nothing is holding or satiating the entity and why it started to misbehave. This is why her scabbard was created, but it's not a perfect solution. Throughout 1.4, we see evidence of this as when Phaethon and Miyabi were both stuck in the outer ring hollow, her sword went berserk with foxfire flames overflowing from it. Only by resheathing it in the scabbard did Miyabi regain control. This might also be why her father warned both Zuyuan and the main character that Miyabi should under no circumstance use the blade if the scabbard is damaged. Now when we put all of this together, I feel that the way the sword works is basically like this. There is an ethereal contained within the sword that wields and can impart immense power. Each user is able to access this power, but taking in all that ether energy eventually corrupts them and causes them to become ethereals themselves. Before that happens, the inheritance ritual is carried out where the new wielder kills the previous wielder after they are partially or fully converted to an ethereal. The past user are then absorbed into the sword and their strength is added to its overall cumulative power. This is perhaps why the blade is considered to be cursed and a forbidden tool. I mean, not only does it resonate with immense amount of ether, it very likely holds within it an extremely dangerous ethereal. Not only that, the ether energy it absorbs continuously grows with seemingly no limit. Just imagine after 7 generations how much power this thing really holds. It's likely forbidden because not only does it make use of an ethereal's powers, it's practically a nuke waiting to go off. If such an unfiltered and uncontrollable weapon were to fall into the wrong hands, it would be akin to a nuclear device handed over to people who would detonate it without hesitation. So just on this merit alone, it would make sense why the Hoshimi family has kept it a secret, not only to preserve their power but also to prevent catastrophe. Plus, think about this. If every ethereal it has ever absorbed were to suddenly be released in the middle of New Eridu, the damage would likely be beyond measure. So to sum all of this up, the secret and key to the Hoshimi's strength and influence lies within their treasured heirloom, a weapon of immense power. The family has kept the weapon secret due to its nature and to safeguard it. For generations, they have sacrificed their bloodline in service of New Eridu while using this sword. Despite their rather tumultuous history though, Miyabi may likely end up breaking this cycle. While the sword did try to goad and tempt her much like it did with the other past users, Miyabi managed to overcome its temptation and even offered another way. By the end of 1.4, she ultimately convinces the entity to cooperate with her, which it surprisingly found intriguing. It honestly kind of reminded me of Naruto. The Ninetales was a constant threat to Naruto all throughout the first half of the story, but later when they cooperated, Kurama became his strongest partner. Plus, there's a lot of similarities with all the inner work stuff, the fog stuff, so it just really reminds me of Naruto. So I feel this is sort of a similar situation with Naruto, but we can only wait and see if it turns out this way. There is still plenty we don't know, like who the being in the sword is, how and why have they been sealed there, or if this is really how the sword even works. All questions that can only be answered when more of the story unfolds. For now, part of what I discuss will just remain as assumptions and educated guesses, and the sword will likely remain a dark secret of the Hoshimi family. With that, I'll end the video here. Do you agree with the ideas I shared here, or do you have an alternative take on the secret weapon of the Hoshimis? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found the video entertaining, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.